welcome you here. And this is we're commemorating the 8th birthday of Rabbi Jacob Kret, who you'll be hearing about more in a moment, but it's really a special occasion for us, and other things too, which we'll talk about as we go on in the afternoon.
So, hello everybody. It's a great honor to speak at all about Rabbi Kret. If you feel the warmth of this place, and the crowd here, and the spirit here, you are feeling the warmth of Rabbi Kret and Mrs. Kret, who really created the most enormously beautiful, welcoming, warm haven here in the old Broadway Synagogue initially for the Sheirat HaPleta, the survivors who came into this community and created a very beautiful community. The warmth of Rabbi Kret and Mrs. Kret is something that I have to say has stayed here because it's penetrated the walls, the fabrics, the seats, etc. But today we are so honored to say that we have found in our own Rabbi Moskowitz a worthy successor to Rabbi Kret, who welcomes people, who makes everybody understand that we are all a family, and we are all trying to accomplish the best we can for our communities, for Israel, for our people everywhere in the world. Rabbi Moskowitz is a person whose very essence is welcoming people into the community, making people feel that they are so much loved and they belong here. And I would just say it's no easy task to try to speak about Rabbi Kret, because Rabbi Kret, in every moment of his life, the beauty of so many years of warmth and love and kindness and welcoming, every one of those moments had a story associated with it. Somebody would walk in to the door. He wore shorts on Shabbos morning. He wore shorts and some plaid shirt, and he comes in, and Rabbi Kret's standing here, and he walks down, and he walks to the back, and he extends his hand, and he welcomes this person. Good Shabbos, welcome. And he said, I'm sorry I'm not very well dressed. And he says, it's perfect, please come in, etc. This was Rabbi Kret. We have a story, a beautiful story of Rabbi Kret's warmth and welcoming nature. It was to everybody. And Norman, you were kind enough to bring reprints of Chana Levy's beautiful article about Rabbi Kret, which is in the back. There are copies. Please take them. One of the stories that Chana Levy tells about is Rabbi Kret comes to shul one morning and he sees that graffiti has been taken off, that the doors are so clean, the sidewalks have been swept, beautiful. And he's wondering how this happens. So he looks around and he sees a man standing by, a person from the hotel next door, which was a residential hotel with very poor people. And this man is standing there, and he's looking at Rabbi Kret. Rabbi Kret walks over to him and says, did you do this? And I says, yes. He said, it's so beautiful. I'd like to take care of you. How much do I owe you? And he says, oh, no. I did this because I wanted the reward of seeing your smile. When I see your smile, I have your reward. So that was a neighborhood person. Chana Levy also reports the story about how Rabbi Kret was the mashgiach in Barnard, and the Jewish Theological Seminary as well. But he was also in charge of the kitchen and the kosher kitchen, etc. And so Rabbi Shir, who was the chaplain of Columbia for many years, tells a story about how when Rabbi Shir would go back to Columbia and to Barnard, and several Hispanic people came up to him who worked in the cafeteria and said, have you seen Rabbi Kret? How's Rabbi Kret? This was 6 years after he retired from that position. And what we know about Rabbi Kret is that what he really wanted to do is to, with all the struggles and what Rabbi Kret and Mrs. Kret went through the war and then resettling here and bringing up their 2 babies who were sitting there, Miriam and Norman, and just creating a great community, a great family. The lesson that Rabbi Kret took home from this was the need to reflect in our daily actions God's kindness and the fact that we were created in the image of God, and everybody was created in the image of God, and it doesn't matter who they are, they were created in the image of God, and we have to make them feel that we know that. So with kindness and with love, befriending everybody, so that everybody knew that when they came into Rabbi Kret's presence, they would come into a person who really cared about them. So if somebody comes to Rabbi Kret and asks Rabbi Kret, I have a question to ask you about observance, and I'd like to know what you would do in this situation. So Rabbi Kret says, so tell me, what's your question? And he would tell his question, and then Rabbi Kret said, so now, for me to give you an answer, I have to know something about you. Tell me about yourself. So where did you grow up? And where did you learn? What is your level of education? And how are you? Tell me about your family, your life, etc. He says, okay, so here's what I think you should do. Here's what I think you should do. And he tells him what to do. In a way that was, he sought to be naked. He sought to find a way that somebody could actually act in accordance with tradition and observance, but in a way that would fit their lives, that they could actually do it and feel like they were not being burdened, but it was an act of love, of observance, of commandments. And so Rabbi Kret tells him what he suggests that he do. And he says, and the man says to Rabbi Kret, so is this what you would do? And Rabbi Kret says, that's not the right question. For every one of us, there's the proper way of behaving. And I think if you did that, that would be very beautiful, he said, and just made that person feel very welcome. I remember sitting upstairs, where we all were a little while ago, and it was Shal Shudis, it was Shabbos afternoon, and we were sitting between Mincha and Mariv, and we were eating and singing Zmiros, etc. And Rabbi Kret, I was sitting next to Rabbi Kret. I had the privilege of knowing Rabbi Kret very well, because Rabbi Kret, my mother and my father, my father was very close to Rabbi Kret from the displaced persons camp after World War II. And Rabbi Kret created a yeshiva, and my father was the administrator of the yeshiva before Rabbi Kret. And they were very close. And when my father died, when I was very young, I was a year old, Rabbi Kret basically took us into his family. So Miriam's my sister, and Norman's my brother, and I mean, I felt like I was Ben biased. I was part of the family. I knew Rabbi Kret very well. And Rabbi Kret, so I was sitting next to Rabbi Kret, and Rabbi Kret says to me, Jacob, they say, people think that if you live a good life, and you really are good to people, and you do chesed and kindness, and you observe mitzvahs, that the reward for that is the olam haba, the world to come. He says, that misses the point. The point is, the reward is actually the olam hazeh, it's right now, and it's in the world to come. This is the reward. People were happy, people were singing, people felt good, they felt connected, there was a peace in that room, peacefulness. This is the reward. The reward is how people act towards each other and how we behave towards each other. I mean, there's so much to say. I'm going to leave a little bit of time for Norman to speak. But I would just say, I had the privilege of being Rabbi Kret's president of this synagogue for 25 years. And people ask me, how could you have been president for 25 years? How did that ever happen? And I told them it was very simple. I became president, and 2 years later, I went to Rabbi Kret and I said, Rabbi Kret, so my term of president is coming to an end. It's time for us to choose a new president. He says, Jacob, wait a second, Jacob. At my age, he was then 65. He says, at my age, I shouldn't have to deal with a new president. So you need to be president, and when I retire, then we'll have a new president. So I thought he was basically telling me he was thinking about retirement. Well, he didn't retire until 25 years after I became president. So that's how I got to be president, 25 years. And in that period of time, what I saw was the essence of what has remained, the spirit of this shul over and over again. You're all here You're all people, Rabbi Kret were here, who want to know all about you. We want to know if you're okay. Are you okay? How are you? Really meaning, how are you? And we love an welcoming spirit. And I just wanted to say, I hope you all feel that. Rabbi Moskowitz, thank you for becoming our leader and for helping us continue that tradition in a great, warm, kind way. And I think I've said what I want to say right now.
You just gave me a speech. But it kind of looked different. It was more like It's so nice to see all you here who have braved the cold to come to the old Broadway Synagogue. Chevra Talmud Torah Anshe Ma'aravi, better known as Rabbi Kret Shul. Anyone who knew my father remembers him for his welcoming smile and radiant personality. Those qualities endeared him to all who came in contact with him and made them want to spend time in the shul, in his home, and in his presence. He loved everyone, especially students from Columbia, Barnard, and JTS. My father learned and became a Rosh Yeshiva in Beis Yosef of Novardik in Poland, a yeshiva that emphasized Musar, the philosophy of Tikkun Hamidos v'Hanisha v'Hanefesh, improving and remedying the traits of the soul. He attended shiurim given by the Steipler Gaon, Harav Yaakov Kanievsky, the father of the current Gadol Hador, Harav Chaim Kanievsky. Papa was also zochet to spend Shabbos in the home of the Chavetz Chaim, from whom he received a bracha for Arichas Yomim, a blessing for a long life. Despite his background in European shtetl upbringing, he came to America, a Holocaust survivor knowing no English. Yet, he and my mother managed to attract countless young people of all backgrounds to the shul. I vividly recall him standing at the front door of the shul, hoping to gather a mere minyan. By the time he retired, after 48 years as leader of the congregation, thousands of people walked through these doors and came closer to Yiddishkeit. They were mostly unaffiliated Jewish men and women who would be drawn to him by his genuine menschlichkeit, unconditional love, and Torah scholarship. He was the real thing. To me, of course, he was my father. Yet looking back at the same 48 years I spent with my parents in the shul, I see that he was special. He wasn't selectively nice. It made no difference whether you were a janitor or a judge. He loved all, and he felt everyone was entitled to respect. And he paskined in a way that his contemporaries wouldn't have. For a young man dating during the Sphira who asked if he could take his date to a movie, my father said, "For you it's all right." For his son it wasn't. When a local businessman came to shul asking to have the Omid for Yortzeit, expecting to be refused because he kept his store open on Shabbos, my father looked at him and said, "Go up and daven. You will not always be a Mechalel Shabbos." And the story came true. The very same person later became a Shomer Shabbos, a Shomer Torah mitzvahs, and a very wealthy philanthropist who supported many yeshivas and religious institutions. He told his story to his doctor, who then called to relate the story to me. So even before the Kiruv movement became popular, as Rabbi Greenblatt will tell us, my father, Rav Yaakov Kret, without intending to, was a one-man Kiruv movement. He spoke from his heart, giving over what he learned in Europe and inspired all those who came through these doors to ultimately become Shomerei Torah mitzvahs. He did this with a warm smile and his totally non-judgmental attitude and personality. I miss him, as does Old Broadway. He would be so pleased to see the shul continue to be a Makom Torah with its own newly installed rabbi, Rabbi Mike Moskowitz. My sister Miriam and I, who grew up here, as well as our children and grandchildren, want to wish Rabbi Moskowitz and his wife as many long, successful, happy years in Old Broadway as my parents had. My family and I thank you for remembering him on his yahrzeit. And a special thanks to Dr. Paul Rudensky, who single-handedly has kept my father's dream alive. Thank you.
I want to thank Norman and Jay, both of you, for really beautiful, beautiful speeches. Thank you so much. I think it was, just for me, an incredible schus to be able to daven with Rabbi Kret and learn from Rabbi Kret for the few years I was here where we overlapped. And it's wonderful to, I remember your father saying things like that, you know. But I would like to add another piece to it, which was that he was a very determined person. I remember every Friday afternoon he would call me, and he wouldn't call me actually because he wouldn't bother talking to me. He'd call my wife, and he'd say, "Send to Dominion." And if I ever said no, that would be it. You know, it would be like I was doing some sort of horrible torture to him. But that kind of determination is what we need. You know, that's what we need in the shul and what we need in life in general. And you know, for me, that was a really important lesson. And many lessons that I learned from him. And tremendous schus to be really associated with Rabbi Kret and with the shul. And now we're very excited that, as Jay said, we found a worthy successor. Now, for those of you who don't know, we were rabbi-less, essentially, for the last 13 years. We were fortunate to have Daniel Friedman, who was teaching our Sunday morning shir. It was excellent, but that's not the same as having somebody on Shabbos. And in general, during the week. So we're really lucky now to have Rabbi Moskowitz, and I'd like to introduce him. I'll just say a few words about Rabbi Moskowitz. So we were contacted by Torah Masorah. They said, I think we have the right person for you. And they had some people that I think they ran by me before. Nobody really was even close. And I met Rabbi Moskowitz. We talked for a few minutes, and I said, wow, this is it. This is really it. And I think those qualities that we're talking about in Rabbi Kret, that kind of warmth, that non-judgmentalism, but also that kind of determination. I think these are things that reflected in Rabbi Moskowitz. And there was a person, some of you who know Jason Kaplan, who attended here for a few years and then was from Richmond, knows Rabbi Moskowitz from his childhood and also knows Rabbi Moskowitz as an adult. I called Jason and I said, so Jason, tell me about this guy, Mike Moskowitz. And he said, he's great, he's wonderful, I recommend him highly. And so far, Baruch Hashem. So we look forward to working with you, with you, and being led by you, God willing, for many, many years to come. And in the tradition that Rabbi Kret established of being warm and real and determined. So I'd like to now welcome Rabbi Mike Moskowitz.
Thank you all very, very much, and it's a distinct honor and pleasure to be here. I feel unworthy. Instead of praising or singing Rabbi Kret's praises, I would just like to focus on praising his song, which is one of rebirth. That literally from those ashes, from generations, to be able to fill the shoes of those who came before us. And for me, a simple guy from Richmond, Virginia, to be able to occupy a similar space, to be able to speak to my generation, to take my experiences and make them somehow valuable, it's just the greatest honor. I don't know what my ancestors did that made me worthy of this, but I feel just like professionally, so too spiritually, I'm standing on the shoulders of those who came before me. And so thank you all very much for making this possible. And this is really also the song of Or Sameach. Unfortunately, Nata Schiller is sick right now and wasn't able to come. But what Or Sameach does, for those of you who don't know, is allow people to reach their spiritual potential. And what's unique about Or Sameach in many ways, and we're going to have really the honor and the pleasure of having Rabbi Dr. Greenblatt, and I'll introduce in a second, who would, I believe, really epitomizes that which Or Sameach attempts to accomplish, which is to take the raw potential of the human spirit and to give it access to its own natural habitat of spirituality, to gain access to learning, to allow them to develop the level of learning, the skill set that parallels their secular and academic achievements without ever having to amputate their past or contort who they are to feel like their identity is somehow more worthy to the Almighty. Rabbi Dr. Greenblatt attended Cambridge for undergraduate, graduate school, and then received a PhD in linguistics, and then became part of the faculty. Rabbi Greenblatt now also teaches in the introduction program at Or Sameach, while he continues his research in, I forget the official title, but basically it's for languages which are in danger. What is it? Yeah, that. And so, the word thing doesn't do good things for it. It's hard for me to talk. But it's a unique opportunity for us to see what Or Sameach does, and really that, like Rabbi Kret said, that Rabbi Kret was a pioneer, like a one-man kiruv operation. And unfortunately, I know the feeling, because I've been there, of opening the door and waiting for that 10th guy, and be like, all right, come on, like it's on a shkia. But and I'll tell you, because there's a picture. I think we have a picture. Is it upstairs? Maybe it's almost like there's a picture.
In one of the books.
In one of the books is a picture of Rabbi Kret. It's a great picture, and it just captures like the passion and then there's this yearning for completion, right? In other words, as long as there's somebody like. We have to invite everyone to the Pesach Seder, because as long as there's somebody who's not there, like my Pesach Seder isn't complete. And I feel that like Rabbi Kret felt like old Broadway isn't complete if there's a Jew in Harlem that like needs a minion, right? And Baruch Hashem, there are a lot more Jews here that need us, and so this place wouldn't be the same without us, and it certainly wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Rabbi Kret. So I just want to say thank you to Dr. Densky and for the entire Kret family for making this possible, for all the supporters. And it's really my great kavod, it's my great honor, it's my pleasure to introduce Rabbi Dr. Greenblatt to be able to tell us a little bit about the kiruv movement and to share with us his own reflections and experiences of being part of the movement.
It's an amazing honor to be here before you today, to feel what remains of an amazing man, to smell in the walls what he built over here, to hear the way people speak of him. It's inspiring, and I hope that in some way the work that so many people are trying to do can do justice to his memory. I wasn't able to meet him, I didn't merit to meet him, but he was certainly, from what I hear, a pioneer and a person who was not a regular person. One of the things that I get asked quite a lot as an outreach professional in Jerusalem, in Or Sameach, is, if this Judaism thing's so good, why are there so few Jews? Why isn't everyone jumping on board? There are a lot of answers. But I often quote Oscar Wilde with people. I like quoting Oscar Wilde, he has good maxims. Oscar Wilde famously once remarked that when I find too many people beginning to agree with me, I suspect I may be wrong. There's something to that. There's something to that. In halacha, in Jewish law, when we talk about a kosher animal, there are certain types of animals that are kosher and some that are not kosher. You have to slaughter it in a certain way. But there are some animals that no matter how you slaughter them, if you, at the end of the day, examine the animal and you find there's something wrong, for example, classically a perforation in the lung or something like that, that animal is not kosher. Why? Because it was terminally ill before you killed it. Right? There's an interesting discussion in halacha about how you determine such a thing before you actually slaughter the animal. So one of the tests that we're given is you see whether the animal can swim. An animal that can swim, for certain types of animals, is a healthy animal. An animal which has its full faculty of being able to swim in water. But one of the commentaries points out that this only means when it can swim against the tide. If you put it in a river and it floats with the tide, so even a dead animal can swim with the tide. What really shows that you're alive is that you can go against the tide, you can go against the spirit of the zeitgeist. And it's rare that you meet somebody like that. From what I can glean in the short time that I've been here, Rabbi Kret was one of those people. I've been asked to speak a little about the history of the outreach, the kiruv movement. I think about 100 years ago, probably before that, but around 100 years ago, I guess, is when the term first came into usage, or common usage, the term melting pot. This idea of melting pot, you associate it typically with New York, right? Truth is, it was used long before that, but really it was a play, The Melting Pot, which popularized this term, and it really represents this idea of taking different peoples, different cultures, and smelting them together in a pot. So they become one. They become American or British or whatever. Melting potism was very, very strong in America. And it was something that took away from a lot of people their Jewish identity, or at least the primacy of their Jewish identity. This was a problem. The concept of melting potism was a problem for the Jewish identity, but it was not helped by the fact that the immigrants who came here at that time were struggling to feed their families. And when you're struggling to feed your families, so spiritual development often takes a backseat. There's a lot of pressure. Keeping Shabbos is very hard, and you get fired every time you don't turn up to work on the Shabbos. So there was an idea of, well, if you must be religious, don't flaunt it. Right? Don't be different. Don't, at least externally, don't show your heritage, your culture. Just fit in with everybody else. It's okay in the privacy of your own home. Do what you want. But don't flaunt it. Don't be too Jewish. Eat bagels and lox. Kosher style, maybe. But don't be too different. And I think it's not an exaggeration to say that that was the defining characteristic of the times for decades. That wasn't helped by the fact that the rabbis who came from Europe very often didn't have a mastery of English. Certainly they didn't grow up on baseball and hot dogs, and weren't able to relate to the same extent as rabbis who came later. But there came a time when this began to change. Sounds to me like Rabbi Kret was at the forefront of this. There were many other rabbis. So just to contextualize what was happening at this time, what was beginning to happen, was that there were rabbis who, if not born here, grew up here, understood the culture, and understood how to relate and how to make Torah and Judaism relevant, and to speak to their generation. It's a superficial canard that's often leveled against Orthodox Jews, traditional Torah-abiding Jews, that we don't change. You people are stuck in the past. You don't change. It's not true. We do change. But we change according to criteria. Yosef Ber Soloveitchik, a tremendously insightful rabbi and philosopher, he once remarked that if a person were walking in the desert and he came across a ravine and he saw there was a bridge stretching from one side of the ravine to the other, and there was a big sign on that bridge saying this bridge was built by a poet, so-and-so, son of so-and-so, who came and lived as a hermit and decided to build this bridge. So Rabbi Yosef Ber said, I might pay as a tourist to see this bridge, but I'd be loath to put my family in a car and drive across that bridge, because I don't believe that this poet had the requisite qualifications to take into account the stresses and strains of the environment and of the weather and of everything, the winds, to make sure that it wouldn't crack under the pressure. Because he didn't know, he never studied engineering. Said Rabbi Yosef Ber, in order to bridge from generation to generation, you have to have a PhD in halachic engineering. You have to understand that you have to be flexible. There's a flexibility within the halachic system. But if you change too much, too quickly, it snaps, breaks. You change too little, also breaks, right? If you don't leave enough room in the bridge, right, for the temperature, for the metal to expand, contract, so it's also going to break. You have to know how to balance those things, and that's not a simple proposition. You have to understand, you have to be a person who's learned, knowledgeable, a person who understands how to change with the times. And that happened. And this coincided also with the times changing, that this idea of melting potism started to go out of fashion, and people started to talk about the salad bowl, or many others there. Multiculturalism, I guess, is how people talk about it today, since the 90s. This idea that it was more okay to be proud of your own cultural heritage, and it was okay to express that. And as the new rabbis came on the scene, there was a confluence of that idea and a freedom to express that idea, and also the fact that people were more affluent. They were able now to concentrate on other things. Right? They were able to educate, to think about sending their children to yeshiva. They were able to, having their own businesses, they were able to choose not to work on Shabbos if they didn't want to, etc., and so forth. What really happened was a whole change of attitude. The attitude before was, we have to survive. We have to collect passports. Because in the ashes of the Holocaust, many who came from there, my grandparents, my great-grandparents included, and they went to South Africa. I wasn't American, but the experience was the same. The focus was, we have to rebuild, we have to somehow get ourselves established, put down roots and be able to survive and feed our families and collect passports in case it ever happens again. That's the reality we were faced with. There wasn't an idea of, let's build a yeshiva. That wasn't the focus. It was immediate survival. But that changed. That changed when people, thank God, became more affluent, more able. Before 50, 60 years ago, there was no such thing as a yeshiva that opened its doors to anybody who wanted to come learn. Study Torah? You don't keep any of it? You want to come study? No way. What are you joking? There was no such idea. Yeshivas started to spring up, or Sameach among the first, and many that came afterwards, that started to cater to people who were interested. A couple of generations had been missed, had been skipped, there'd been a sort of break in that chain of transmission. And the yeshivas, this new movement, this movement of outreach, of kiruv, started to step into the gap to provide that parental education that the parents weren't able to provide. That my father, alav shalom, wasn't able to provide me because his father was too busy trying to earn a living to teach him what he knew from Europe. And this happened again and again and again. But it's not a new idea. The concept of Jews being responsible for educating other Jews, that goes back as far as Judaism itself. So the concept of teaching, of imparting wisdom, of helping people, helping other Jews, didn't start with rabbis like Rabbi Kret. But it took on a new face, and it became now a focus, and it became something which in our generations, where for the first time the huge majority of Jews in the world were not in touch with their heritage, didn't know, weren't rejecting Judaism out of philosophical problems, but just grew up not knowing. I'll never forget, I visited my sister 15 years ago. She was in Miami, Florida. She was doing an internship there. It was Hanukkah. And we went to a menorah lighting. And there were about 1,000 people there. It was in a strip mall outside. And the rabbi had a fantastic shtick. He pressed the olives live in front of everyone. Out came the precious drops of olive oil. And he filled up the menorah. And he lit them. And he made the bracha. And myself and maybe 10 other people said Amen. It shocked me to my core. These weren't people who had a problem. They were there at a Hanukkah lighting. But they had no idea that you said Amen at the end of a bracha. I couldn't believe it. And even though it's all too tempting to go back and try and say, and this was the moment I made my big decision, it wasn't. But it certainly contributed to my decision. This is something I wanted to do in my life, because our ancient and beautiful tradition deserves to be continued. Deserves to be passed on to further generations. At least, at the very least, that they should have an idea of what it is that they're thinking about throwing away. The Rambam points out that there's a mitzvah in the Torah of loving Hashem. So that's a difficult idea. What does it mean to love Hashem? How can I love Hashem? But the Rambam says that one of the main things involved in the mitzvah of loving Hashem is to help others come close to Hashem. That means that if you think something is precious, you think it's worth sharing with other people. In fact, the Chasam Sofer, one of our great rabbis, points out that Abraham was the only person in the Torah who was ever referred to as somebody who loved Hashem. Avram is called Avram Ohavi, the one who loves me, loved me. He points out why. So Abraham really was the first Kiruv rabbi. I mean, Abraham had this house open, you know, on all sides, and he invited everybody in. Come on in, sit down. I mean, make a bracha on that, you know. But that's what he did. He was open. The Chasam Sofer says he could have been a much greater person in terms of his own personal development. He could have sat and studied in yeshiva and stayed there and shackled back and forth day and night and thought about all these great, grandiose ideas. But he gave that up because he understood that it was more important to bring other people in. That's why, says the Chasam Sofer, he was called the one who loves me. That's somebody who truly loves his Judaism and truly loves his heritage. Someone who chooses to share it with someone else. You sit in the ivory towers. Now granted, the person has to work on himself first. Right? It's very difficult to fill up cups if you yourself aren't a jug that has something in it. But at a certain point, you have a responsibility to your people. And you actually have to care. You actually have to care about people. The Torah doesn't mention openly anywhere that there is a world to come. Fascinating idea. We think it's so central to Judaism, right? Reward and punishment. The next world you're going to get, you know, rewarded for these things and punished for these things. The Torah doesn't mention it. It can be inferred from some places. The Talmud works it out using rabbinical thumb twisting. But it doesn't say anywhere, there will be a reward in the world. Why not? So our commentators tell us. Because that's not your focus. Your focus is here now. Your focus is, this guy needs help, I need to help him. The methodology is also very important. There's another mitzvah in the Torah. The mitzvah is called mitzvah of Tochachov. If you translate literally, it means reproach. Reproof. Tell someone he's doing something wrong. Right? But if you read carefully how one's supposed to approach this reproach, you see that you're supposed to examine the idea with someone. The Torah says that you're supposed to approach it in a way of placing ideas before somebody and saying, let's consider this, let's talk about it. You tell me what you think, I'll say what I think, and we'll discuss it, we'll debate it. When a person tries to attack other people, tell them what they're doing wrong, you're bad, look at what you're doing, you're a sinner, this is not the approach, this is not the correct and the traditional, and certainly not a productive approach when it comes to helping people. And, you know, people respond to positivity. And we try in Yeshiva very much to emphasize that. People respond. Everyone has to understand, I'm speaking to myself as well, that everybody who knows anything has a responsibility to teach other people who don't know. And Moshe Feinstein famously said, they say out there in the world that time is money. He says, that's not true. Money is time. Money is time. The base currency of a Jew is time. You're given, please God, 120 years on this earth. You're given a certain amount of time. And from the minute you're born, you're dying. You have a limited amount of time. Every minute you spend doing X is a minute, there's an opportunity cost of Y. Every minute you spend earning money, right, there's a minute you didn't use something. Your money is you. Money is time. Moshe Feinstein said, therefore a person, just like he has an obligation to give 10% at least of his earnings, he has an obligation to give 10% of his time to other people. At least 10%. And I know everyone's thinking, we mean the rabbis. No, everyone. If you know Aleph Beis and someone doesn't know Aleph Beis, you have a responsibility to teach them Aleph Beis. It's incumbent on everybody. We've always been a people that has emphasized education above everything. I read once a study on the IQ level of American Jews, actually. And it was trying to explain the fact that apparently, according to this study, the average IQ of an American Jew was about a standard deviation above the average. Okay. I'm not vouching for the accuracy of the statistics, but at least we know there's the stereotype that Jews are smart. So this particular paper made the following argument. He said probably one of the reasons is because back in Europe, the study was only Ashkenazi Jews, didn't take into account Sephardic Jews. Back in Europe, what did the Catholic population do with their most intelligent boy? become a priest, right? So he'd go off and he'd study, you know, and become, if he succeeded, celibate, go off to the Vatican, and never pass on his genetic code. What did we do with our most intelligent people? Well, the rich man would want to marry his daughter off to that guy, right? Because you know, he'd be the rabbi and the scholar and the Talmid Chacham of the town. This paper said Jews were breeding for intelligence the whole time. And it's been so important to our people. Not just intelligence, ability to learn, wanting to learn. The desire to want to know more. There was an experiment done. There was a violinist called Joshua Bauer, famous violinist, fantastic violinist. And the Washington Post did this experiment. It was 15 years ago. They took him and they put him in I think it was Grand Central Station. And he took his violin, which happened to be one of the most expensive violins ever made. Fantastic sound. And he sat there and he played. You know what happened? People walked past him. The same man who just days before and after was playing in the grand music halls and people were paying hundreds of dollars to see him. Why? Because often, when it's not the right context, people don't notice what's right in front of their nose. And I certainly feel that in my life, I was lucky enough to have those rabbis that I met, Rabbi Krets of the world, but my Rabbi Kret, show me that it was right there the whole time. Through the love that I got from them, through the answers that I got from them to my questions, and through their approach to me. And that's a valuable thing. That's why I do my job. And that's why so many people choose to be involved in this world of reaching out to their fellow Jews. When I was growing up, we had a rabbi I grew up in Cape Town, in South Africa. The rabbi in the shul, his name was Rabbi Dr. Ivan Lerner. Amazing man. I believe he does the rounds on the speaking circuit in America. He's American. I think he's from Cincinnati. And I remember very clearly as a kid, for some reason I stayed in for the rabbi's drasha. Usually the kids were ushered out. But I remember clearly him shouting one Shabbos, Friday night in South Africa. Friday night was the time that everyone went to shul. I remember him shouting, "Be a hypocrite! Be a hypocrite!" What he was saying, what he was telling everyone in this particular drasha was that Judaism is not an all or nothing thing. People say, well, I can't do Shabbos, it's too much, so forget it. It's a bit like, I don't know if any of you have ever dieted. You're dieting, so there's this wonderful trick, the Yetzer Hara, our side that pulls us down, has. If you ever do this, you're dieting and you have one piece of chocolate, or you have one ugula, something. And you think to yourself, does that ever happen? You think to yourself, that's it, the day's gone, I'm just eating whatever. Whatever, I messed up today, I'm just going to eat whatever. Could there be anything more ridiculous than that? It's ridiculous. So you messed up once, so get back on the horse. But we have this disease called perfectionism, where we want everything to be perfect. So we think, if I can't do it perfectly, I can't keep a whole Shabbos. Can't keep away from my phone for 25 hours. Give yourself half. Do what you can. Anything you can do is valuable. Any mitzvah, even half of the time, half the way, whatever you can do, that is growth. That's how we're supposed to grow. Be a hypocrite. And finally, I heard that Rabbi Kret was a survivor in Europe. So there was a philosopher, his name was Fackenheim, Emil Fackenheim, famously said that after the Holocaust, there is a 614th mitzvah. I wouldn't characterize it like that, but his point is well taken. And the 614th mitzvah, according to him, was don't award to Hitler posthumous victories. They tried to wipe us out. And they came very close. And at the founding of the State of Israel, just before, Ben Gurion sat with his fellow cabinet members And there was discussion about awarding certain privileges to members of the yeshivas. And those who were against awarding those privileges said to Ben-Gurion, what are you doing? You're giving them so much. And he responded, don't worry, in 20 years they will be gone. There won't be any more yeshivas. There won't be any shuls. That's gone, that's in the past. Look at us now. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that in the aftermath of that destruction, we would become what we have become and are still becoming? And it's thanks to those great pioneers, it's thanks to those new rabbis, those Alt-Noi rabbis, who started this whole thing, who started this whole movement, this whole revolution of reaching out to fellow Jews. It is an honor to stand here in the place where one such person stood. It's an honor for everyone to come to this shul. It's an honor for you, Rabbi, to be involved in continuing the work that's done here. It's an honor for all Sameach to be involved in any way with this, and I wish you all only mazel and bracha in your endeavors. And remember, this thing that we have, this special gift that we have, our Judaism, our history and our heritage, must not be given away cheaply.